Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 companies, had 20 of those fail, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book. It's called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach people how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every win. Now I'm the founder and CEO of Sononify Technology. We are a nearshore software engineering firm helping existing engineering teams scale. And today I am joined by Jimi Li, who was an engineer who rose up to leader, partner, and founder, and is now CTO at ALM Global. Jimi, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me.
You
Very
bet.
glad to be here.
You bet. I'm excited for the conversation. If you would, Jimi, take a minute or two and walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Absolutely. So my career is actually, some people will consider it interesting because it's very atypical compared to the majority of the CIOs, CTOs.
You did hear me talk about how I've had 30 companies, 20 failures, and 10 wins. This is an atypical show.
Yes. So if there's one word I have to describe it, it's probably transformation, right? So I studied electrical engineering with the hope that someday I'll be building robotics, right? All the robotic automation, all those stuff come from the science fictions. But my first job was a software engineer for a B2B software startup. I was one of the only two developers, basically did everything there. So using today's word, I was a full stack developer, engineer. I was an architect. I was a deployment manager, a QA engineer as well. Did everything there, but definitely learned a ton.
The beauty of startups, right? You get to roll your sleeves up and be involved in everything.
Exactly. I was actually lucky enough to join one of the largest corporation back then. That was GE, General Electric. So I was part of their leadership program. It was a multi-year program where you basically learn different part of technology in different part of the business globally. Things like ERP systems, CRM, infrastructure, software development, digital system, you name it. So I was fortunate enough to have some great exposure to all those part of the technology at a very young age. It's really like an on-the-job MBA program for me. And after the program, I joined GE Capital during the digital transformation stage. They call it e-business transformation back then. So I built their online banking platform. So
We're probably similar ages, and I remember back in the e-business hosting in the e-business world. Yes, that's for
yeah.
us old guys.
So that was financial services, right? And what comes next is where things are taking a turn, where it's becoming atypical. So I was under a very heavy influence of my wife to join a beauty cosmetic company called L'Oreal. So I joined L'Oreal being the employee number one in their digital technology team. So kind of the founding member of the team, helping them with digital transformation, helping the company to implement their direct to consumer strategy, led the team to build their global e-commerce platform. And it was a lot of fun. And of course, my wife got free goods. And for the majority of the product,
That's why she
50%
wanted
off.
you to work there?
She really convinced me. She told me, Jimmy, it's the kingdom. It's a company you'll be dreaming for, right? So, I have no other choice.
Happy wife, happy life, right?
That's it. That's it. So after that, I did very similar things, again, under very heavy influence of my wife again, joined Coach, which is a handbag luxury company, helping them with their digital transformation,
I might have to
e-commerce.
stop you because if my wife starts listening to this podcast, she's going to make me follow a similar path. And you might be hurting the husbands out here, but keep going.
So, both L'Oreal and Coach, there you consider them retail, right?
Mhm.
Um, and because of those experiences, I realized how important data is, right? and it will be the foundation of everything we do, right? And back then, that was probably 10 years ago. And this is the most important direction that I saw. I have to get myself into that. So I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to join News Corp, working on their data platform. So I think like building CDP, insights engine, a marketing technology stack, transform how they do business, basically. And so I came from, software, retail, and that's media, right? After News Corp, I actually have to do 2 years of consulting due to some family issues. But because of my experience across different industries and verticals, the skill set is somewhat universal and industry agnostic. So I was able to bring in a lot of I would say, fresh perspective and quickly learn a new industry. So that worked for me pretty well. And actually, that's how I landed my current job at ALM. I told the story. A lot of people didn't believe me. I originally came in to ALM as an interim CTO.
Okay.
So they want someone to do a 6 months project and to come up with a transformation strategy, a technology roadmap that can lead to success, right? So I guess I did a good job there. Within 2 weeks, they actually offered me a full-time job. And I have been staying there ever since for the past 6 years. It was quite a journey. We did a lot of things to transform the business.
So the pressure was on. You were hired as interim, but you turned them quickly. That's awesome. Tell us, for those who aren't familiar with ALM, tell us about the company.
Yeah, sure. The ALM stands for American Lawyer Media. So we actually came from a traditional publishing media company background. Over the year, we have transformed it into a full 100% fully digital company. We provide content, data, and intelligence and benchmarking, expert analysis for the law firms, for the corporations, legal department, and also for the legal and compliance industry overall. We are the number one business of law um, company within the industry. So what that means is we help the law firms, the GCs, to better manage their business. So things like profitability management, merger and acquisition, leadership, business development. So those areas. It's actually quite interesting because within legal, the majority of if you ask pretty much anybody within the large legal corporation or law firms, they all know us. We're quite famous within legal. But outside of legal, very few actually ever heard of us. And in fact, we have more than 95% of I would say, market share within the legal industry, within the large law firms. So if I mention our competitors like LexisNexis, Bloomberg, you would know. For our technology audience, some people say we're the Gartner for legal industry.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, outside of the software engineering world, most people haven't heard of Software Leaders Uncensored.
I
We're
have.
quickly growing into the leader of that space. So I like it. Tell us, what are some fun tech projects you guys have going on that you guys are working on?
Yeah, I think everybody knows the AI hype is blowing everywhere, right? So everybody's into the agentic AI these days. We're no exception. So we're investing a lot of the time and energy looking into this technology and how we can apply it within the enterprise as well as to our external facing product. So we've made a lot of progress. I'll give you one example. One of the things that we're experimenting is actually what we call the kind of like a genie system. So if you have the traditional system, right? If you ask a question, the difficult part is you can't really predict what the user is going to ask, right? So especially when it comes to data analytics, a lot of times what large language model does is acting like a router to route the right question to the right system in order for that system to answer it, right? But with the advancement of agentic AI, we're now able to actually answer more of those questions, even if we don't have a canned answer for it. So those are the things, of course, there's a lot of, I would say, difficulties in terms of ensuring that the accuracy of the answer for compliance purposes and for governance purposes. So that's why we're still spending a lot of effort trying to make sure the system is actually trustworthy, that is ready for the prime time.
That's the biggest challenge with agentic AI, right? Um, is the accuracy of it. And it doesn't tell you if it's not certain. It always comes, most LLMs come back with responses that if they don't know it, they make them up to sound really good.
Yeah, exactly.
And I certainly understand in the legal world and the challenge with that.
That's right. In our business, is all about relationship and trust, right? Once you lose the trust, it's very difficult to get it back.
No doubt. Well, tell us about your software engineering team, how many engineers you have, where they're located, the work model your team follows.
Yeah, sure. So we're quite a global team, I would say. We have engineers all over the US, so they're remote engineers, and we have teams in India, nearshore developers in Mexico, Colombia, the Latin areas. We also have developers in Europe, places like Spain, Bulgaria. It's very much globally distributed, and definitely give us one of the benefit is the 24/7 coverage. So naturally, you have full coverage all over the world. In terms of how we're structured, our team is very much structured in I would say, product-led platform first structure. So what that
Okay.
means is we structure our team using what we call the fusion team. So it's a cross-functional product squad. So you have team members from product, project, engineering on the business side, and then we have a dedicated platform engineering team group that take care of the platform engineering, DevOps, those kind of things, and a data organization that supports different product groups, and also a kind of an architecture office that basically controls at the higher level, how things work together.
Gotcha. From having a global team like that, how do you guys manage time zones and making sure your teams across the world are in sync?
Yeah, that's a great question. We used to have a lot of issues with that because, when we get started, the majority of our offshore developers are in India. And, there's a huge time difference. And even with Europe, that 5 hour, 4 hour time difference sometimes can be quite a big problem for us. So
Yep.
what we did is we really embraced the idea of, a digital brain. These days, when you talk about AI, you talk about context, right? So the more information that you can feed to the AI, the more context you can provide, the better it is. And same way it works for our team. The more that we document, the more that we provide to the team in terms of the background knowledge, in terms of the conversation that they have, meeting that they have, the more context that they will have. So we use you know, AI as a form of a knowledge base or a second brain for a lot of the team members. They can get the knowledge from each other regardless of the time zone, right? So they can just ask the AI, what did I miss? Give me a summary, right? Catch me up, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So we were talking about this pre-show, and let's bring it to the forefront. But the kind of the top three challenges that you're facing now, and the first one we talked about is around finding the AI value and delivering real value. Talk about that if you would.
Yep. So it's quite interesting. I actually wrote a LinkedIn article about that as well. There, in my opinion, there are three types of value, right? So number one is the employee value, which is, in my opinion, probably the biggest trap out there. So what I mean by that is employee value is the productivity gain, right? The time saved by applying AI to your workflow, to your daily job. Let's take developer, for example. So if I'm a developer, the AI coding tool can save me 3 hour, 4 hour of my time on a daily basis. But here's the problem. The time saved does not automatically translate into cost saving
Hmm.
or any monetary value, right? So if I'm a developer or I'm a product manager, the time that I've saved sometimes goes into my personal life, sometimes going into research, sometimes going into something else. It's almost impossible to measure what is the real monetary gain from those employee value, right? Especially when a company don't have a very specific strategy. So a lot of times we hear, you know, I think some people call it productivity leakage. So that kind of productivity gain that you get from AI tools does not translate into real value for the company. That's
Well,
the
and
yeah,
that's straightforward, uncensored feedback because everybody's still trying to figure that out. And I know some are making bold claims around that and what it's doing, but I get to talk with leaders like you every day. And the straight talk is I think we're all still trying to figure that out.
exactly. I think that's is very difficult, right? So the truth is anytime you involve people in the loop, the people and the process, all those two factors have to change as well. So I'll go back to this. I always refer back to a kind of the 60-year old framework. That's the PPT, right? People, process, technology, right?
Uh-huh.
When you have one factor change, which is the technology, and we're talking about AI, and the other two have to change with it, it's a very long process and very expensive, time consuming journey to get there. And a lot of companies actually start with that, which in my opinion is probably the wrong focus, right? So when you get started, you want to pick something that have a quicker turnaround time, a more obvious kind of a road to generate real value. But doesn't mean that it's not important. But again, back to my point, you have to change the way that people work, invent their workflow, in order to match that.
Very well put. You were talking earlier about how when you're doing these major transformational changes, dealing with people and getting them to change or upskill can be a challenge. Please talk about that.
Yep. Yeah, totally. So this is kind of a lesson I learned, right? You know, Probably a few years ago. The most important part of the transformation is actually, you know, dealing with people. So what I mean by that is really about 80% of the transformation is psychology and communication, right? And only 20% of that is technology, architecture. And a lot of the technologists, right, like our technical people, they think that the success is the live in the architecture diagram, in the roadmap, right, in the technology itself. But the organizational trust, the psychology safety, right? And how do you shape a common vision across the organization is even more important, right? So as the CTO, my real job is really to make people believe in a future that doesn't yet exist and lead them towards it. Yeah. And very importantly, I think, that changes as team sports, right? So I talked to a lot of the CIO peers or CTO peers. They were tasked to lead the transformation journey, right? But the reality is you have to partner with your cross-functional peers, like the CFOs, the chief sales officer, chief marketing officer. Is a organizational transformation. It's not a technology transformation. So having the support from your peers, your partners, is vital to the success of the transformation.
I like it. How about as a CTO, as a business leader, as an executive, how do you go about transforming yourself in this wave of AI and, where you're going to steer your career from here as everything's changing so rapidly?
That's interesting, right? I spent a lot of time thinking about it. At the core of the AI transformation, you're transforming people. You're transforming how they work, which is the process, and also that that's supported by the technology itself. But the way I look at it, we're dealing with a change that information, knowledge, and data, right, or intelligence is becoming a commodity. That used to be the differentiator, right? Where, as an executive or as someone in a particular industry, that information advantage is what you have. You know something that other people don't.
Hmm.
That advantage or that mode is definitely going away, right? And when you hear a lot about the what they call the human in the loop, I guess why there's a human in the loop. There's a human in the loop because AI still don't know about, let's say, 70, 80% of the knowledge that exists in people's head, in their brain. But that gap is rapidly shrinking. So in 5 years, that gap may be just 10%, maybe doesn't exist anymore. And at that point, what advantage do you have over AI? And people talking about AI taking our job, right? I think it's a real concern. It's a real concern if you don't adapt. So what I'm thinking, how do we transform ourselves is number one, you have to embrace the AI in terms of adopting the technology. There are two things that AI does not have. Number one is agency. What I mean by that is asking the right question, identify what the problem is, right? Solving it, a lot of time AI can find you a solution, but very few people actually can proactively identify the question, the problem, ask the right question, frame it, right? Then solve it. And number two is creativity. If you look at a lot of those AI tools, what it's good at is summarizing existing data points. If it exists, you ask the AI, it will find it and present to you. But if it doesn't exist, there's still a room for human being to actually unleash our creativity to create something brand new. So those two things does require us to ingest information and data at a much higher capacity.
The way you articulating it from your vantage point is fascinating and spot on. I really like how you think about this and the points you're bringing up.
Yeah, I think here comes the action item, right? So in order for us to embrace it and utilize it to our advantage, we have to have a AI powered second brain that help you to ingest, to find those information, summarize it, but in a way that it fits your own context, that you can use it right away. So when you need it, it will surface automatically, effortlessly. So that way you become much more efficient. And think about, so one of the examples, I don't know if it's going to become a reality or a trend, is a lot of companies, they're getting rid of their middle management layer,
Hmm.
right? So
That's certainly flooding the news with that data.
yeah. So that just means somebody have to provide oversight, right? Have to manage a lot more than they used to. And guess how you do that? If you just do it all by yourself in the old way, without your second brain, your head is going to explode. The only way to do that is to leverage your second brain, leverage AI. So that way you're capable of processing much more information, much more efficiently. So I think, I kind of, it's not really a prediction per se, but the way I look at it, within the next 5 years, all the technology, you know, workers or executives, we really have to embrace it and master it within the next 5 years to stay relevant.
I couldn't agree more. You have two choices: embrace it or get out. I mean, you'll become obsolete awfully quickly. It's not a fad, it's here, it's changing rapidly. And even the best of us here who are in this industry still have to educate ourselves each and every day on how rapidly it's changing. So when
Exactly.
you, so Jimmy, when you look back at your career, What's a brutal lesson you know now that you wish you would have known earlier in your career?
I would say I kind of touch on that. Number one is people, right? And really, when you start talking to the people, you start to be able to ask the right question. Because for what I do, the number one skill set that I have is asking the right question, spot the issue, right? And identify what the problem is, and why is it important for my stakeholder, and then provide a solution. And earlier in my career, the different route that I took is, I was so obsessed with technology solutions. And I thought that was everything. That's the skill set I have. That's my selling point. But in reality, understanding people's need, understand the real business need is the number one lesson that I have learned throughout my career.
I often joke, and I wrote a book about it on how when you do have failures, you have two choices. You can either and we're all human. You're allowed to get upset. You're allowed to be mad. But from there, you have two choices. You can study why that failure occurred and use that knowledge to minimize it happening earlier, or you can let it take you down. And I wish I've learned as much from my successes as my failures, but you don't. When you have successes, sometimes your mind, you even get cocky about it and you don't analyze why you succeeded. But I'll tell you what, when you have failures and you use that to your advantage, man, you study every aspect of what you could have done different, what went wrong, and why. And those are the lessons, in my opinion, that really stick in people's brains.
Absolutely.
Jimi, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. I appreciate you sharing your background on the journey of your career, your top three challenges. I love how you describe that you need to use AI as your second brain. Good stuff. Lots of great clips from this. I'm excited to see how you continually evolve the tech landscape. Before we wrap, what's your no BS advice for today's tech leaders who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these rapidly changing times?
If there's one thing I have to say is probably constant learning, lifetime learning, right? So I came from a background where I'm not the top student, right? Did not graduate from a top school. But one thing I did over the past 25 years in my career is I learn every day. I spend 1 or 2 hours learning, adapt myself, right, to the new technology. If you're in technology, you have to do that. You have to update yourself every single day. And probably everybody already know that, but it really works.
And I think everybody knows it. The question is, how many people really take the time to do that? And we're in a time where you can quickly become irrelevant as AI gains more knowledge and how people think, as you put it. So, Jimi, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you like the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, we'll just go ahead and send it to your competitors. Maybe the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.